טוב, אני חושבת שכל מי שהיה צריך להגיע הגיע. אז גלעד, אתה רוצה להתחיל?
Sure, I'll be very happy to start. Hi, Adam. This is Gilad speaking. And we'll just start in a second. And I just want to welcome all the audience here. And good evening. My name is Gilad Meiri. And I'm the artist director of the Poetry Festival with Noah Shakarji. And I want to welcome you all. We're very, very happy to be here with you all. And I'm honored to introduce Yonatan Berg, who is a poet and a writer. And he will host this conversation. And we'll present Adam Zagajewski in a minute. But Adam, I want to take a second and remind you that we met when I had black hair about 12 years ago or so in Jerusalem, at the poetry place. And,
oh yes, yes, absolutely, yes.
And you met my mother, who was born in Lvov in 1941.
Yes, I remember, yes.
It's very exciting, and I have the shivers right now again to see you again here. And I'm very, very pleased to see you. And before we begin, some technical issues. Your microphone, everybody's audience microphone will be on mute during the conversation. But we will dedicate the last 10 minutes or so to your questions. And then you'll be able to open the microphone. But you can also write in the chat box during the conversation, and we will try to assist you as best as we can. And now I pass the microphone to Yonatan, who will be doing the hosting, and I wish you all a very pleasant meeting. Yonatan.
Okay, please. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Everyone, it's good to see that people are still gathering around the fire of poetry, even though in these days it's electricity. But we can still sit together, and I'm privileged to have Adam Zagajewski with us. And I'm gonna spread out what we're gonna do in the next hour. I'm gonna say a few words of introduction about Adam, and then he's gonna read a couple of poems. We're gonna have a short conversation between us. I'm going to read some more poems, and then I'm going to collect some questions from the chat box. So feel free to write them, and then we'll, in the last 10 or 15 minutes, we'll ask Adam your questions. So I want to do an introduction to Adam's poetry, but I want to do it a personal one, not a general one. Anyone can go to Google and Google Adam and see that he's a constant candidate for the Nobel Prize in Literature, won many international prizes, translated to many languages. That's all you can see in Google. I want to speak a personal approach to Adam. And I want to say that as a young man and a young poet, I was looking for a language that I can understand the world with, that I can make sense of the chaotic world we're in, and a language that I can create with her a dialogue between me and the world. And to my surprise, I found out that that language that I'm seeking and that can help me go through life lies in the Polish poetry. It was a great surprise to find out that maybe it's my origin, that my father is from Ukraine and my mother family is from Germany. I don't know, maybe, I don't know the color of skin. I don't know what it is, but I found out Polish poetry present to me a language that with her I can deal with the world. To say something big, it's a language that gives a lot of respect to the world and admiration to the world, respect to the history, theology, philosophy of the world, but in the same time, a great respect to the personal life, to the concrete life, to the senses, without choosing one over the other. And I started reading Polish poetry, Huszewicz and Milosz and Herbert and Szymborska and others. And I found my language. And I feel that Adam, which his poetry I read for years, and it's a great influence on my writing and, as I said, my inner life. I think Adam right now possesses this kind of language. He presents us this kind of language, I won't say by himself, but almost by himself. He's the spokesman of this language alive with us, that I think give us the highest quality of that language. And now in the Corona and any other time that I seek answer and understanding and opening the plot of being alive, I go to Adam. I go to the book as Asymmetry that was published in Israel in 2017 in the translation of David Weinfeld, and I read it and I get back the way to look at things. So I thank you, Adam, for this many years of advice without being next to me, but you keep on the advice is good advice as always, and you give me these moments of being open to the world, and as I said, admire the world, because I think your poetry, and I pretty much envy anyone that is with us now and never read your poetry, and now after this meeting we'll go and buy the book. I'm envy at him because you give these moments of opening to the world, facing sometimes the horror, sometimes the difficulties, the suffering, but then in the same time the beauty. And the way beauty is mixed with other things, and we can take out beauty even from the lowest moment. So that's my introduction, my personal introduction to Adam, and I want to ask you, Adam, first if you want to say a few words of opening, and then if you would like to read us some of your poetry to get the poetry moving in this event.
Well, first of all, thank you, Yonatan. It's very moving. Thank you for acknowledging this. And we met by email before, and I wrote a few words about your English translations. So I know your poetry, and I'm still interested in it. And I know I have readers in Israel. It's makes me very happy, and so thank you. Now let's go to work. So do you want me to read? I will read this poem with the Gregorian chant, right? This the one you wanted me to. Do you hear me still?
Yeah. Good. Hear you loud and clear.
Szybki wiersz. Słuchałem śpiewu gregoriańskiego w pędzącym samochodzie na autostradzie we Francji. Drzewa śpieszyły się. Głosy mnichów chwaliły niewidzialnego Pana o świcie w drżącej od chłodu kaplicy. Domine exaudi orationem meam. Prosiły męskie głosy tak spokojne, jakby zbawienie rosło w ogrodzie. Dokąd jechałem? Gdzie schowało się słońce? Moje życie leżało rozdarte po obu stronach drogi, kruche jak papier mapy. Razem ze słodkimi mnichami zmierzałem w stronę chmur, sinych, ciężkich i nieprzeniknionych, w stronę przyszłości, otchłani, połykającej twarde łzy gradu. Daleko od świtu, daleko od domu, zamiast murów cienka blacha, ucieczka zamiast czuwania, podróż zamiast zapomnienia, zamiast hymnu szybki wiersz. Przede mną biegła mała, zmęczona gwiazda i błyszczał asfalt szosy, wskazując, gdzie jest ziemia, gdzie ukryła się brzytwa horyzontu, a gdzie czarny pająk wieczoru i noc, wdowa po tylu marzeniach. Okay.
Thank you, Adam. You wanna go on and read one more, or you wanna speak a bit?
Oh, maybe I read another one. The suitcase poem, right?
Yeah, yeah. Whoever has the Hebrew collection, it's in page 177.
Walizka. Rano Kraków był pochmurny, dymiły wzgórza. W Monachium padał deszcz. Alpy, niewidoczne i ciężkie, leżały w dolinach jak kamienie. Dopiero w Atenach zobaczyłem słońce, które sprawiło, że powietrze, całe powietrze, cała ogromna flotylla powietrza zamieniło się w drżące złoto. Jak mówią pisarze religijni, nagle stałem się innym człowiekiem. Jestem tylko turystą w widzialnym świecie, jednym z 1000 cieni, które snują się w wielkich halach lotnisk. A za mną, jak wierny pies, jedzie na małych kółkach moja zielona walizka. Jestem tylko nieuważnym turystą, ale kocham światło.
Thank you, Adam. Beautiful as always. So I want to start our conversation, and first, I think we have to address what's in front of us, and I want to ask you about this time, about the coronavirus crisis, and I want to ask you about your life. In which way this quarantine life changed what you read, the way you write, the way you approach poetry?
Well, it's much too early to, I'm slow. It will take some time. I need reflection. I don't know, no one knows how long will it take. If it will take very, very long time, it will certainly change all of us. But, people are frivolous. If it ends in 2 weeks, then we'll forget it and it will be just the same. And there'll be no change in us. So hard to say. It's not, for me, it's not a great time for writing. I've just finished, I've written a long essay on Joseph Brodsky, but it has nothing, there's no connection between the coronavirus and Brodsky. There will be a celebration of 80 years. He would be 80 in May. So this is kind of anniversary essay.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with Brodsky without the fact that with his heart, he was now in a danger group with the corona. But,
he would be, yes.
Yeah, but do you find yourself, I find myself in this corona times, in my reading list, I go to things I haven't read for a long time. You have this poet, or writers that you meet in your life are very important to you, and then you move on. And I find myself going back to things I read when I was 20. I'm still young, but 20 years ago. So does it happens to you also? Do you read different things now at home, or you keep on with your regular reading list?
No, I keep with my regular reading. Now, so far, maybe 5 months from now, if it continues, I will only read the Bible and things like this. But right now, I just continue things that, reading very, very, very different things.
But do you have the sense that that it can also create this approach or this moment of solidarity that maybe was missing from the way the world works, and maybe these times of corona can emerge a stronger sense of solidarity between people, which solidarity that I think is very present in your poetry, for example.
Yes, but now, all of us are hidden in our homes. So it's more a kind of mental solidarity. There are no possibilities almost, well, electronic, but I'm not on Facebook, so I can't express my love to humanity on Facebook. And, I try to do it via poems, you know, although, as I said, I'm not writing right now poems. I wrote this essay, but maybe there will be a change, although I think that the world will change, but I think that people will not change. I think people are mostly unchangeable, so we'll be just the same.
So maybe the big news from this event is that if the corona will go on, Adam Zagajewski will join Facebook.
Will what? Will
join Facebook.
I don't promise it.
Okay, so if speaking about solidarity, I want to move to a different topic, which is very present right now. We just ended in Israel the Holocaust Memorial Day, and each one of the people in front of you probably watched a movie about the World War and the Holocaust, or read a text about it, and all of us stood at 10 o'clock in the morning for a minute of siren in quiet with the memory of the people that died in the Holocaust. But I want to speak with you about the present. And the first question is that if you read the Polish poetry as your poetry, and Milosz with Campo de Fury, and Herbert and Szymborska and Krynicki and Różewicz, all of them wrote about the World War, wrote about the Holocaust, wrote about facing the destiny of the Jews in that time. And what I want to ask you, if that habit, if that language inside the poetry, the Polish poetry still exists, does the young poet still have something to say about that times, or it's no longer a subject that is of interest to the young writer?
Well, it's probably more, it seems to be that it's more of interest to the prose writers, to the fiction people. There are still not many, but and I see it as a kind of international thing, that many young writers are trying to understand, going back to the moments of, to the early 40s. In poetry now, in Polish poetry, in the young Polish poetry, I don't see it much. The younger poets now say that the biggest enemy is the corporation. So, you know, they write anti-capitalist poems, and they don't have much memory. Maybe I'm not just, but the things I see are really not about history, not much about memory. They're very contemporary, like from day to day. They don't have this long, what Brodel called the longue durée, the long duration. But it may change because, as you know, every 5 years there's a new generation of poets. So now we just have to wait.
Yeah, I understand what you say about prose writer, because just now in Israel was published the book by Olga Toporichuk. I hope I say it right. The Nobel Prize winner, yes, which wrote a very big book that I'm just reading now about Yaakov Frank, yes, and his experiences in Poland. And she did an astonishing job in research and creating again this Jewish Christian environment in Poland. And maybe that's my second question, or the following question, that you talked about the history, the history mind of a poet, the history capacity of a poet, which you have it in your poetry, as we said, maybe Milosz and Herbert. And I want to ask, in your poetry, there's poems that goes into history topics. There's poems that deal with a philosophical question. There's poems that deal with theology. And then there's poems that deal with the daily life, the small life, a moment, the senses, the climate. And I want to ask, how do you approach a poet? What makes you sit in your table and say to yourself, today I want to address this topic of the World War, or Schopenhauer, as you have in poems, or Hegel, or Brecht. And then you have other poems which describe, you know, wandering with the car in France somewhere, or in Greece somewhere. So what makes you approach a poet with, as Herbert says, the big words, the big topics of humanity? What makes you go to the big topics, and what makes you go to the small moments?
That's a very interesting question. It's not so that I sit at my desk and I am saying to myself, oh, today we will deal with Hiroshima. No, that's not. No, it's the other way around. The poems come to us. Don't you know this feeling? It's not that we deliberately say, oh, I will write a poem about the Holocaust, or a very simple poem about a suitcase or something like this. No, the poems come to me and come to you and come to poets, and they attack you. You are, of course, you are not totally, you know, passive. But it's, yeah, the poems come to you. For me, sometimes the writing of a poem is, I have the sensation that of a crisis, not a major, but the world is falling apart. And to write a poem is like to save it, to save the world, for myself, not for everybody, but for myself. I see very much the action of writing a poem as an action of synthesis. You synthesize something that's about to fall apart. And it helps me very much. You know, it's a kind of therapy, because it's very hard to live in a world that's falling apart. But I really don't know how to answer the question why one day I would write about Werner Heisenberg and another day about a suitcase. It just comes to me, you know, and you know, as probably every poet, I read a lot. I'm very curious of things, of history, of contemporaneity, of people. I've written several love poems to my wife, and I feel there's no, I don't see it as a problem. That they all belong together for me. They're part of a quest, because basically, if you write, it's a quest. You try to understand.
Dear friends, Yonatan and Adam, there are 132 participants who are roaring for poetry. And Yonatan, if you may please read in Hebrew, and Adam will read also, because we cannot hold the gates. They're on the gates. They're roaring for poetry.
Sure.
Okay, so Adam, maybe before you go on and read the next poem, I will just read the previous one that you read, Suitcase, because people saw only a part of it in the screen. So it's a short poem. I will read it in Hebrew, and then please go on and read the next one. It's okay, Adam?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm reading in Hebrew. מזוודה. בבוקר היה מעונן בקרקוב. הגבעות העלו עשן. במינכן ירד גשם. האלפים לא נראים וכבדים, מוטלים היו בעמקים כמו אבנים. רק באתונה ראיתי שמש שחוללה, כי האוויר, מלוא האוויר, שייטת האוויר הכבירה כולה הפכה זהב רוטט. כמאמר הסופרים בעלי האמונה, פתאום הייתי לאדם אחר. הנני אח תייר בעולם הנגלה לעין, אחד מאלפי הצללים שנעים באולמות הענק של שדות התעופה. ומאחוריי, כמו כלב נאמן נוסעת על גלגלים קטנים, המזוודה הירוקה שלי. הנני רק תייר פזור נפש, אבל אני אוהב את האור. So that was מזוודה suitcase, and now Adam, which poem would you like to read?
Should I read this one that just appeared about my mother?
Yeah, about my mother, yeah.
Okay. O mojej matce nie umiałbym nic powiedzieć. Jak powtarzała, będziesz kiedyś żałował, gdy mnie już nie będzie. I jak nie wierzyłem ani w już, ani w nie będzie. Jak lubiłem patrzeć, kiedy czytała modną powieść, zaglądając od razu do ostatniego rozdziału. Jak w kuchni, uważając, że to nie jest dla niej odpowiednie miejsce, przyrządza niedzielną kawę, albo jeszcze gorzej, filety z dorsza. Jak czeka na przyjście gości i patrzy w lustro, robiąc tę minę, która skutecznie chroniła ją przed zobaczeniem siebie naprawdę, co zdaje się odziedziczyłem po niej, jak i kilka innych słabości. Jak potem swobodnie rozprawia o rzeczach, które nie były jej forte, i jak ja jej niemądrze dokuczałem, tak jak wtedy, kiedy ona porównała siebie do Beethovena, głuchnącego, a ja powiedziałem okrutnie, ale wiesz, on miał talent, jak wszystko mi wybaczała, jak ja to pamiętam, jak leciałem z Houston na jej pogrzeb i w samolocie wyświetlano komedię, i jak płakałem ze śmiechu i z żalu, i jak nic nie umiałem powiedzieć i wciąż nie umiem. Will you read this in Hebrew, or do people have it?
That's what I want to ask the audience. Gilad, what do you think? Should we read it in Hebrew?
בוודאי, כן, יונתן, וגם הקרדיט לתרגומים המעולים זה לדוד.
Yeah, so Gilad, I said it in the beginning, but we need to say it again, that the beautiful translations are of David Weinfeld, a great translator from Polish, and I'm going to read it in Hebrew, and then we're going to move on to the next one. על אודות אמי. על אודות אמי לא הייתי מסוגל לומר דבר. איך חזרה ואמרה, אתה תצטער שכבר לא אהיה, ואני לא האמנתי. גם בשכבר וגם בלא אהיה. אך אהבתי לראותה קוראת רומן אופנתי, ומציצה מיד בפרק האחרון. ואיך הייתה מכינה במטבח, לדעתה מקום שאינו יאה לה, קפה של יום ראשון, או גרוע מזה, פילה משיבוט צפוני. ואיך היא מחכה לאורחים, וביטה בראי ואותה הרשת פנים שהגנה עליה ביעילות, לבל תראה את עצמה כמות שהיא. את זה כמדומה, ירשתי ממנה, כמו גם אי אלו חולשות אחרות. ואיך היא דנה, אחר כך בטבעיות, בסוגיות שלא היו הצד החזק שלה. ואני הצגתי לה, לא מחוכמה, כמו אז כשהשוותה את עצמה לבטהובן, ההולך ומתחרש, ואני אמרתי באכזריות, אבל את יודעת, הוא היה בעל כישרון. ואיך הייתה סולחת לי הכל, ואיך אני זוכר את זה, ואיך טסתי מיוסטון ללווייתה, ואיך לא הייתי מסוגל לומר דבר, ועדיין אינני מסוגל. Moment of silence for the beautiful poem. So, Adam, would you like to read another one?
Sure. Should I read Ruth or try to praise the mutilated word?
I think Ruth.
Ruth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a second. Oh, yeah, here it is.
Ruth was a our neighbor here in Krakow, so we knew her well. She was a friend and a neighbor. Ruth przeżyła wojnę w Tarnopolu, w mroku i w półmroku, w lęku. Bała się szczurów i ciężkich butów, głośnych rozmów, wrzasku. Teraz umarła w ciemności, w białej ciszy szpitalnej sali. Była Żydówką. Niekiedy nie wiedziała, co to znaczy. To takie proste i zupełnie niezrozumiałe, jak algebra. Czasem domyślała się. Gestapo wiedziało doskonale, co to znaczy być Żydem lub Żydówką. Wielka tradycja filozoficzna pomaga. Definicje są ostre jak nóż, celne jak buddyjska strzała. Była piękna. Powinna była zginąć wtedy jak inne, zniknąć, nie zostawiając śladu, odejść bez elegii, jak tylu innych, jak powietrze. Lecz żyła długo w świetle dziennym, w słońcu, w powietrzu codzienności, w tlenie zwykłego Krakowa. Często nie wiedziała, co to znaczy być piękną kobietą. Lustro milczało, nie znało filozoficznych definicji. O tamtych czasach nie zapomniała, lecz nie mówiła o nich prawie nigdy. Raz tylko opowiedziała tę historię. Jej ukochana kotka nie chciała zostać w getcie. Dwukrotnie nocą wracała na aryjską stronę. Jej kotka nie wiedziała, kim są Żydzi i co to jest aryjska strona. Nie wiedziała i dlatego pomknęła na drugą stronę jak strzała. Ruth była adwokatem i broniła innych. Może dlatego żyła długo, dlatego że innych jest wielu i potrzebują obrony. Oskarżycieli nigdy nie zabraknie, lecz obrońców jest mało. Była dobrym człowiekiem i miała duszę. Wydaje nam się, że wiemy, co to znaczy.
Beautiful. So I'm going to read in Hebrew.
Sure.
And there's a note in the beginning that says Lezecher Ruth Buczynska.
Yeah, this was her name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. היא שרדה את המלחמה בטרונופול, בחשיכה ובחשיכה למחצה, בחרדה. היא פחדה מעכברים ונעליים כבדות, משיחות בקולות רמים וצווחות. עכשיו היא מתה בחושך, בשקט הלבן של אולם בית החולים. היא הייתה יהודייה, לעתים לא ידעה מה פירוש הדבר. הרי זה כה פשוט וכה בלתי מובן לחלוטין כמו אלגברה. לפעמים הייתה משערת. הגסטאפו ידע היטב מה פירוש הדבר להיות יהודי או יהודייה. המסורת הפילוסופית הגדולה מסייעת, ההגדרות חדות כסכין, קולעות כחץ בודהיסטי. היא הייתה יפהפייה. צריכה הייתה להיספות בעת ההיא כמו האחרים, כמו האחרות. להיעלם ולא להותיר זכר, להסתלק ולא אלגיה, כמו רבים כל כך. כמו אוויר. אבל היא האריכה ימים באור יום, בשמש, באוויר של שגרה, בחמצן של קרקוב הרגילה. היא לא ידעה לעתים קרובות מה פירוש להיות יפהפייה, הרי היא שתק, היא לא ידעה הגדרות פילוסופיות. היא לא שכחה את הזמנים ההם, אבל כמעט מעולם לא דיברה עליהם. רק פעם אחת סיפרה את המעשה הבא. החתולה האהובה עליה לא רצתה להישאר בגטו. פעמים חזרה בלילה לצד הארץ. החתולה לא ידעה מי הם יהודים ומה זה הצד הארץ. לא ידעה ולכן טסה לצד השני כמו חטא. רות הייתה עורכת דין והגנה על אחרים. אולי בשל כך האריך הימים, מפני שהאחרים רבים הם וצריכים הגנה. קטגורים לא יחסרו לעולם. אבל הסנגורים מעטים. היא הייתה אדם טוב ובעל נפש. נדמה לנו שאנו יודעים מה פירוש הדבר. So that's Ruth, and I want to ask you, Adam, to solve the mystery for me. How come Poland brought up this variety of poets that of enormous scale, of a great poetry, and I cannot think about another nation with the similar kind of poetry been written in the last 70, 80 years. So I want to ask you, how come Poland, what is it in the air of Poland, in the climate of Poland, that creates this landscape, this place for the creation, for the birth of such poetry, of such great poetry in such a short time? Do you have an answer for the mystery?
You know very well that this is an unanswerable question. I don't know. I just know, I know that, you know, when the war ended, Poland was totally destroyed, both materially and morally. And then the Red Army came, and there was no independent government. And I think that some poets decided, we will be like the government, we'll create the government. A totally invisible government. Milosz, who already during the war wrote these incredible poems like Campo di Fiori, or The Poor Christian Looks at the Ghetto. And Herbert was a little younger, and Szymborska was a little younger. But I think they without talking to each other, they decided we have no government. There was a feeling, probably some people had the feeling of guilt that so many Jews died who were our citizens. There was a feeling of total despair. And these poets decided to, as I say, we'll be the government. We will, because the moral values were lost or almost destroyed. And poets decided to rebuild human civilization. And you know, the books they published were really not read by millions, as you know how it is with poetry. They were read by several thousands people, but these poems stayed in the memory. They become classical now, and they create sort of what's the best thing in the Polish society.
Yeah, I was very surprised, you know, Adam, that I discovered that you have a previous book translated to Hebrew that not many people know. Much before your poetry books, that was a book of yours about Poland under the USSR times.
Yes.
It starts with this amazing picture from the Solidarity movement gatherings of workers, and I was just writing your name in the National Library here in Israel, and suddenly I saw another translation of Adam Zagajewski. I was amazed. And what I want to ask after reading this book about the history of Poland, the history of Poland under the Red Times, you can say, is that what is your advice? Although this is also a not answerable question, but you just talked about the moral duty of the poet to create a government instead of the government. And also in this book of essays, you take a strong position in order to try to express and explain the society, what Poland is going through, and so and so. And I want to ask you, as a poet here in Israel or any other place on the world, how do you approach the paper, the book you're writing, with the feeling of this ability, this this power to speak for the public. You know, in Israel, we had for many years this kind of poetry that was speaking for us, for the nation, for the collective mind. And then we had this kind of revolution that was against it. And as someone, myself, maybe other people in the audience, that want to get back into this place of speaking, again, as I say, as Herbert said, with the big words, with the big ideals, with big statements about being human. What is your advice? How can we approach the page with this kind of urgency and self-belief that we are entitled to write about big topics?
Well, I think it's, again, it cannot be artificial, it cannot be created by a commission or anything like this. You just have to live with these things. You have to be conscious of this. You have to have emotions. You have to be, you know, you have to see the history. But I think there's a danger. There's always a danger that you will lose your private side. It's what's very intricate is that we have to join in the act of writing our very private self, very mysterious self, which we don't understand, with this public intellectual which sits in us. But if you only are public intellectual, it's empty. You cannot. You have to, by a miracle, create a synthesis between this very intimate self, your childhood, your love, your fear, your reflection, and this kind of public answer to. But I agree with Herbert. I think poetry should be big. I think poetry should answer these questions, but in an intimate way, in a you know, not in a. You're not a loudspeaker. It's the danger is of course becoming a loudspeaker.
Yeah. So another question, maybe let's see the time. Maybe it will be my last one, and then we'll read poetry, and then we can get questions from the audience. Mm-hmm. So you're most welcome to write them. My question is about, you had a very long period of time when you lived outside of Poland, if I'm not mistaken, in France and in the US, and then you came back to Poland. I'm not exactly, I don't know exactly the dates, but what I wanted to ask is that, how did you felt, is there a difference writing and thinking outside of your homeland, of your mother tongue, and inside? Did your poetry or approach to poetry was different when you were sitting outside of Poland? And did it change when you came back?
Well, it was, no, I think my approach was somehow changing and growing, I hope, not the opposite. But it was not changed by geography. I didn't change my idea of writing. The countries in which I lived were very different. In France, there's a very strong opposition against any poetry that deals with public matters. Poetry should be incomprehensible. It's about language, and about kind of mysticism, but a mysticism that it's totally private and not understandable. When I went to the US, I suddenly found myself in a much better environment for me. I think American poets understand these questions. And of course, they're divided. There is the Ashbury party and there is the, I don't know, Elizabeth Bishop party. But in the US, I had suddenly friends in poetry. In France, I had friends, but not in poetry. So, but I wouldn't say that these countries in any way influenced my thinking. Or, well, they helped me. I read American poetry and French prose and etc. But I don't think I was really changed by these travels.
Thank you. So maybe we'll read one more poem and then we'll see what kind of questions we get.
Okay, which we have, okay, we have just one poem left, right? So.
Yeah.
Spróbuj opiewać okaleczony świat. Spróbuj opiewać okaleczony świat. Pamiętaj o długich dniach czerwca i o poziomkach, kroplach wina rozy, o pokrzywach, które metodycznie zarastały opuszczone domostwa wygnanych. Musisz opiewać okaleczony świat. Patrzyłeś na eleganckie jachty i okręty. Jeden z nich miał przed sobą długą podróż, na inny czekała tylko słona nicość. Widziałeś uchodźców, którzy szli donikąd. Słyszałeś oprawców, którzy radośnie śpiewali. Powinieneś opiewać okaleczony świat. Pamiętaj o chwilach, kiedy byliście razem w białym pokoju i firanka poruszyła się. Wróć myślą do koncertu, kiedy wybuchła muzyka. Jesienią zbierałeś żołędzie w parku, a liście wirowały nad bliznami ziemi. Opiewaj okaleczony świat i szare piórko zgubione przez drozda i delikatne światło, które błądzi i znika i powraca.
Thank you. I will read it now in Hebrew, but I want to share with the audience, the people that don't have the book, that there is a note underneath the poem which says that this poem was published after 9/11 in the New Yorker, and then it was, you could find the poem lying on walls and gardens in New York, and it was a poem that people in New York used in order to, like you said, bring the world back together after it had fallen apart. So I'm going to read it now in Hebrew. נסה להלל עולם שהוטל בו מום. נסה להלל עולם שהוטל בו מום, זכור ימי יוני ארוכים ותותי בר, טיפות של יין רוזה. זכור סרפדים שהתפשטו חלקה אחר חלקה בבתי האחוזה שנטשו המגורשים. חובה עליך להלל עולם שהוטל בו מום. התבוננת ביאכטות הדורות ובאוניות. אחת עתידה הייתה לצאת למסע ארוך, לאחרת טיפה רק העין המלוח. ראיתי פליטים שהלכו לשום מקום. שמעתי מרצחים שזמרו בעליצות. שומה עליך להלל עולם שהוטל בו מום. זכור רגעים שהייתם ביחד בחדר הלבן והווילון זה. חזור במחשבה אל הקונצרט כשפרצה המוזיקה. הסתיו, אספת בלוטי אלון בגן, והעלים הסתחררו מעל צלקות האדמה. הלל עולם שהוטל בו מום, ונוצה אפורה שאיבד הככלי, ואת האור העדין שטועה ונעלם וחוזר. So we'll go now to questions, and I already see one wonderful question that was written, and that question asks, how did age change your poetry? How did time change your poetry? Did it change during your lifetime, and you were in different places, in different ages regarding writing?
Well, when I was very young, I had metaphysical ambitions, and I wrote poems that were mostly totally unpublished, and then the next stage, I suddenly discovered the public world. And since I lived in a kind of half totalitarian country, in a communist country, and for some maybe 10 years, I discovered the poetry as resistance, as critique of the government, of the ideology of lying. You know, the world of communism was the world of lying. And after these 10 years, I came to the conclusion that I cannot spend my entire life criticizing communists, that it's a waste of life. And I returned somehow to my philosophical beginnings, and I slowly started to write, to leave or to be much less politically involved. And since when this culminated when I lived in Paris, when I was, I don't know, 40 or 35. And after this, you know, as you know, there are poets who are changing with every book, that have even have the ambition. In every book, I'll speak differently. I never had this ambition. I think the other group or the other school of poets say, no, if we only find our voice, let's keep it. We don't need to risk everything in the new book. Because I believe in the voice in poetry. And you don't have 15 voices in you. You probably have just one voice. And unless you are Fernando Pessoa and live in Lisbon, he was the great exception, right? But other poets have mostly one voice. So after this change, which was quite a change for me, I see what happened next until now, not as a revolution, as a kind of quiet evolution. But then, you know, you never know exactly what you do, so you should ask a critic what happened. What happened next?
Another very good question that we get is how much you consider technique while you're writing poetry. Is the technique of poetry, I don't know, in structures? Do you address that, or your poetry is in a way much more spontaneous than that?
Well, in big, you know, speaking very roughly, if again you divide poets into very technical poets who write sonnets, who write very intricate forms, I'm not one of them. For me, the meaning is the most important thing. As form is concerned, I try to write rhythmically. On the other hand, I don't like poems that are only, you know, like prose. Like I want to have to be. I want it to be poetry, to have some music, to have some rhythm, but I have no formal prescriptions for this. So I'm just each poem. In each poem, I try to achieve this kind of musical something, but probably then I cannot, you know, again, it's not so that every poem is different. There's some continuity.
So I also see that we got the internal question of poetry events, and that is what kind of advice you have for a younger poet?
Well, the first one is be patient. Don't be discouraged easily. Read a lot. I think writing poetry has something to do with the reading. Of course, also with life, with emotions, with passion, but also with education. I think poets are nominally the most educated artists. You cannot be a poet without a solid education, not only in poetry, but in history and philosophy. Because poets, as Shelley said, are unacknowledged legislators of mankind. And we are the unacknowledged legislators of mankind. Although when you're very young and you hear something like this, you would panic. Oh no, it's too hard. I don't want to be a legislator. But what I mean by this is you have steadily widen your horizon. You have to fight against easy solutions. You have to go towards more difficult solutions. I know that this advice has no value at all, but who knows?